This is episode 124 of Stand Up. Join me today, Wajahat Ali and Elie Mystal, and a quick visit with my old man. I'm Pete Dominic. Time to stand up with me right now. Hey, everybody. How are you? How are you doing? It is a question that I can't hear the answer to, but I hope you're doing okay. This was the final day of my visit, our visit, at my parents' house in upstate New York, and had another great day up here, helping out around the house, helping my parents out, hanging out with them, having another really fun day. Recorded 4 interviews, did a lot of work, but psyched to be with my parents, and I thought I would catch up with my dad here on the podcast. He's joined me many times, so he sits down with me in a minute here, but before we get to my dad and then Wajahat Ali and Elie Mystal, I do want to mention a couple of things in the news, and I'm sure you're probably paying attention to it. Maybe you're not, but I think it's important to mention what is going on down there in Georgia, and I love this daily email from Adam Parkamenko, who's a former Democratic strategist and campaign guy. It is called The Big Stuff, and he opens it by saying, or he talks about the Georgia election primary, and he says, the banner headline in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution says it all. Quote, complete meltdown. Chief Justice John Roberts got what he wanted when he gutted the Voting Rights Act. And that was on full display yesterday as voting in Georgia was marred by top-to-bottom fuck-ups. From lines so long people knew to bring chairs to broken machines to mail-in ballots that never arrived. And the Georgia Secretary of State has taken no responsibility. This is what Roberts and Mitch wanted. We are always so blown away by the people who stand in line, almost as a fuck you to the people who would deny them the right to vote. But they really shouldn't have to. We are sprinting toward a crisis in November, and that's exactly how the Republican Party wants it. Reminder, Mitch McConnell is still blocking a House bill that would restore the Voting Rights Act. We bet you $1 he doesn't get asked about it today by a totally out-of-touch press corps. But hey, he's not really getting asked about Breonna Taylor either, and she was murdered in Mitch McConnell's town. Mention with my dad coming up here, the Confederate flag is no longer going to be allowed to be flown at the NASCAR auto races, which is a pretty big deal. And, of course, that deadly pandemic. Again, back to Adam Parkamenko and Big Stuff Daily Email. He writes, while Trump has decided the pandemic is over because it was hurting his reelection hopes and his embattled attention span, we are seeing numbers that make clear COVID-19 is still quite present and, in fact, surging in about 20 states. Yesterday, the disappeared Dr. Fauci said the pandemic is his, quote, worst nightmare, and it isn't over yet. In fact, Fauci said, we're at the beginning of it. Trump's disapproval rating for handling the coronavirus has gone from 48% in March to 56% now. And Americans are evenly split on whether the worst is behind us or yet to come. Well, we listen to actual scientists and not Fox and Friends, so we feel pretty certain the worst is yet to come. Please be safe out there. Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm pretty concerned about it, and it's easy to be optimistic because you see it going down where you live. But if you read about the fact that it is spiking in 21 states right now, then how could you possibly be optimistic about that? So those are a couple of things that I wanted to mention here at the top of the show. And, of course, thank all of the supporters of the show, which is on daily. So many new paid subscribers, and welcome to all the new folks. I really appreciate it. Go to patreon.com/PeteDominic or click the paid subscription link in the show links to support this show. I'm doing it every single day, no matter where I am. I'll be posting. So I really appreciate your support. If you haven't signed up, today is your day to sign up for a paid subscription for as little as $5. Please consider it. But let's get to my conversation with my dad, who I'm really proud of for taking a couple of his friends to the racist woodshed and taking them down and, well, no longer calling them friends. I think you're going to like this conversation with my pop. Here it is. Yeah, now it's recording.
Oh, that's exciting.
You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, that's my dad. I'm here at my parents' place in upstate New York. And today, my dad decided that he was going to basically end a man that he knows pretty well on email Dad, you've been going back and forth with this fellow. Why don't we call him what you want to call him, Richard? We don't want to out the poor fellow.
No, let's not out him.
Call him Richard, or you want to call him Dick?
I think Dick would be better.
Then I'll read Dick's side of the email, and you read your side, what you said.
Yeah, we could do that, yeah.
So basically, this guy, the exchange with this guy started with he sent you a quote attributed to Senator Dianne Feinstein that she didn't say. And you challenged him on that, and you said, she didn't say that. He didn't really give a shit. He was like, well, it's close enough. I think he said close enough. But
I don't know what he said. Read what he said.
Anyway, the point is, what's happening right now in the world is people are challenging bigotry and racism and white supremacists. And that's exactly what you did with this guy. And I'm very proud of you, very impressed with the way that you handled this. And this is exactly the kind of role modeling that we all need.
Well, I've been doing this new project that I've started up. It's
called Ending Friendships, I think.
Burn a right winger one a day. And I'm
how many friendships have you ended over their white supremacist ideology?
Well, let's put it this way. When somebody sends me an email and there's 57 names on it, and basically I say, you guys are full of shit.
Yeah.
Some of them answer me, and then I tell them how much more full of shit they are than I thought they were.
Yeah.
But then, there's the rest of those 57 that I don't know how many are right wingers that don't ever answer me, and probably
they're afraid of you because they can't defend their argument.
They're not afraid. They're just, a lot of them are flat out stupid. I mean, some of these people are really stupid. I hate to say it, but they're stupid.
The exchange you had with Richard, Dick, it boiled down to voter ID, I believe, here.
With regrets to anybody out there who's called Dick. I mean, we don't say you're a dick, but this guy, we're calling him Dick.
Right, even though that's not his name.
It's not his name, and but I don't want to insult anybody who likes to be called Dick.
It's a weird thing to be called. It's a weird thing.
I could never.
Yeah, you've always had to hang up with that name, haven't you?
We had a friend of mine when we were in grammar school, and we called him Dickie.
Yeah,
and
that's a little better.
I think it's worse, actually.
You do?
Yeah. You're not a dick. You're just Dickie.
All right, poor fella.
Yeah, we used to call him Dickie. Is
he still around?
He's a little guy. He was smaller than me. He was shorter than I am.
Well, that's hard to do.
I know. He's probably about 5'1" today, and they probably still call him Dickie.
Anyway, he writes, "Hi, Chuck. I'll be him.
Okay.
You're Chuck. You be you. Chuck.
Oh, okay, yeah. I could do that.
Hi, Chuck. You're speaking about identification for voting. I'm for it. You can't get on a plane without identification."
Pete, you're starting in the middle.
Yeah, I'm not going to do the whole thing.
Well, it won't take that long. We should do the whole thing.
All right.
Otherwise, people won't know what we're talking about.
Well, so he said that
Dianne Feinstein with the original quote. You got that there?
Senator from California. The original, he attributed this quote to Dianne Feinstein. Quote, "All vets are mentally ill in some way, and government should prevent them from owning firearms." Yep, she really said it.
And I wrote back, because I'm, pretty fed up with this.
Yeah.
Bullshit. I really am fed up with right-wing lies, making statements that are not true as what Trump has done all of his life. As a civilian, he said if you repeat something enough, everyone will believe it. Now, every right-winger is doing the same thing. Here is what she really said.
And you sent you looked it up and you found the exact quote?
I found the exact, I didn't find the exact quote because that's not a quote.
Right.
She never said it.
Well done, yeah.
And the question is, did Senator Dianne Feinstein say all military veterans are mentally ill and should not be allowed to own guns? No. She said veterans should not be exempt from her proposed assault weapons ban, citing post-traumatic stress disorder as a concern. She did not say all veterans suffer from PTSD or that all veterans should not own guns.
And he responded with, "Hi, Chuck," and then 47 semicolons.
Yeah, he's a bit weird.
What the hell's that about?
Yeah, I don't know.
"Thank you for making the clarification. I can't stand all
of the lies in the news. I must tell you, I hear more lies on MSNBC than any other, quote, news station. No lies, then another 46, 47 semicolons. No lies, semicolons, is what needs to be the standard. Accountability and integrity. Your friend, Richard, a.k.a. Dick. That's not his real name, but we're just going to continue with that.
Dickie.
And then you said...
since you want the truth, what do you think about what the Republicans are doing to stifle voting in Democratic districts? I assume that since Fox is so honest, that they are talking about the problem.
Hi, Chuck. 3 semicolons. He must have been busy.
Yeah, he's in a hurry now. He's speed typing.
You were speaking about 4 semicolons. Identification, all caps, for voting. I am for it. You can't get on a plane without identification. You can't cash a check without identification. I don't want voter fraud, a number of semicolons, but I want for everyone to have the right to vote, no matter what the system. I am sure that there are ways to cheat the system. If 46 commas. You are talking about some other way to keep people from voting. I just don't know. Your friend, Richard.
Oops. Did he write Richard?
No.
It's Dick. That's right.
Yeah, we're not giving out his real name or the name of his company.
And then I answered to him, and now I'm using colons and slashes.
Yeah, you started doing this thing.
I figured out what the hell. He's been doing this for 25 years. I didn't know him. Drives me
You went
nuts.
with a backslash, a number of backslashes?
Yeah, dots, dashes.
Yeah, a lot of dots and dashes.
Yeah.
You also utilized all caps like he did.
Yeah, I did, because now I'm that means you're shouting at somebody.
Right, go ahead.
And that's what I understand. So and that way you don't have to hit the shift button either. You just leave everything caps.
So read yours. How did you respond to his whole...
I just type with my index fingers, so it takes a while.
Mm-hmm.
That's why most of my stuff is short. You just don't know. That's because you aren't open and honest enough to want to listen and learn about both sides of the story.
And then he did his email, his response to that.
This is weird, isn't it?
Is pretty screwy.
Yeah.
He wrote back to you, Chuck, sounds like you have way too much white privilege. And then he used quite a few exclamation marks.
Yeah, I think he was screaming then, yeah.
Then he wrote this, kneel down, boy, kneel before me. I think that Broadway should have a 30-foot lettering that says, very, very proud to be white.
Well, I think this is where we ended our friendship.
Yeah. I think that you got really triggered, and I think anybody would, by the phrase, kneel down, boy, kneel before me. You don't...
I don't know.
I think he's referring to the kneeling protest, maybe? The Colin Kaepernick kneel down, maybe?
I don't know.
I don't either.
Well, he says kneel before me, so it's like...
but he says he's very, very proud to be white, is how he ends it. And so you responded...
Yeah, he's very proud to be white. I mean, like we got a choice.
Right.
So I said, thank you. You finally admitted what you are, a white supremacist racist. Why anybody would be proud of their color totally astounds me. It's the way you're born and nothing else. Don't ever call me your friend again, and I want nothing to do with you or any of your racist friends, ever.
Now, with that response, did you send that to everybody or just Richard?
I think I just went to Richard. Yeah.
Has you heard back from him?
Well, no, he's not my friend anymore.
Yeah. Well, I
expect not to hear from him for a while. Then he'll write to me and call me his friend.
No, well, I just want to say that I thought that was fantastic. And when you shared that with me earlier, I was super proud of you.
Well,
but this is what people are asking that we do. This is exactly what the folks that I'm interviewing want white people to do, is to stand up to their racist friends. And that's exactly what you did.
Well, there's a lot of standing up for me to do, I guess. I mean, I know, I was supposed to go to a party this Monday with a bunch of old Italian guys that, the food is great. The camaraderie is fun, but
your hood was in the laundry.
Yeah,
Couldn't
really.
make it.
And it's funny because I called the guy up that was holding he's in charge of inviting everybody. And I called him up and I said, Joe, that's his real name, Joe.
Yeah.
I said, Joe, I simply can't make it to the party. I says, because I'm a little bit concerned, about this COVID thing. And he says, yeah. He says, I get it, Chuck, and I understand, and it's fine. He says, I still love you. It's not a problem, and I don't blame you. You're right. And then he went on to tell me how a lot of the people that are there just don't believe in any of this stuff. And I said,
what stuff? The pandemic, the virus?
They just think that, I don't know what they're thinking. I mean, how many people have to die? And you got to know somebody who got sick. And it's like, and they're all, these are old guys mostly. They got to be careful. And, and most of them are fat, overgrown.
Overgrown?
Yeah, they're overgrown. I mean, that's a polite way to say it. They're not in. So anyways, and we're talking about it, and I said, now this guy that I'm talking to is an old Republican. The way I used to be an old Republican. And it was like, I says, Joe, we used to get things done. The Republicans, nobody cared about what party it is, as long as they got done and it was right. He goes, yeah, I know. And he said, I miss that. I miss those days. And I said, it's gotten to the point where, now this is a pretty staunch Republican, okay? And he's heavy in the Republican Party and everything. And
now, is he overgrown?
No, actually, Joe's had...
he's at its target weight.
He's a little over the target weight. He's 10 years younger than me, and I thought he was older than me. But
you're in elite shape, so...
It's not that. It's just, he...
Is he flabby?
Well, yeah, he can play golf, I guess,
Well, that doesn't mean anything.
He's got shoulders and ankles and gout, and his feet have been operated on.
Dear, yeah, that's not
poor
good.
guy. But he's a great guy.
Okay.
And I started telling him, I says, we have a president who wants to call the military on Americans. And he goes, yeah. And I go, look, that's not good. He goes, no. But I mean, so some people are reasonable about this, and they're looking, but he said, there's too many people here that I know what you're talking about. They're just over the wall someplace. They're crazies.
Yeah.
And that's in this group. So they're out there. They're every place. Jesus. And a lot of them are on Long Island, I found out.
That's true.
I don't know what the hell that's all about.
I can tell you a little bit about that. Something to do with islands.
Yeah, it must be. I mean, it's like...
People who live on islands, I think, are generally bastards.
I found that to be true myself.
We go to Nantucket every year. That island is full of bastards.
Pricks.
Complete pricks. A lot of them.
I was on an island.
They should rename it mostly pricks.
I was on an island. There's an island up in not far from here where we live, and it's not inhabited, but there's a lot of snakes and things on this island.
And are they assholes?
There's only one guy living there, and the guy's I don't know. He was a nice guy when he moved there, from what I understand, but now he's a prick.
Turns out he's a Unabomber.
A real prick. He lives on this island. And
well, anyway, I just wanted to open the show by applauding you for standing up to your racist friends and ending relationships with assholes. I think that's fantastic.
Well,
wait, we've got an award for you. Bring it out. Bring it in here. Oh, there's nobody here but us.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Well,
I'm impressed, Dad. I love you, and I appreciate that. I think it's fantastic that you call this guy what he is.
Like,
enough is enough, right?
Yeah. I can't wait to see him now,
What do you think about the NASCAR announcing that they're going to get rid of... You can no longer fly. My dad is a big fan of auto racing.
Yeah.
Mom is here, by the way. She's not mic'd, but she's shaking her head up and down. You agree that they should get rid of allow...
Well, yeah.
The issue is that NASCAR is no longer going to allow the Confederate flag to be flown.
Well,
Mom, where are you on the flag? The Confederate flag.
Horrible thing.
All right, we'll mark you down for pro.
It's kind of interesting because the guy who started that is the only black driver to win a race in the last 50 years in the top 3 ranks, which is, in
NASCAR. He's a NASCAR
driver.
Yeah, he's black, and he's the one who started this movement.
He brought it up, and it's interesting because I read this morning, and they said 2 other drivers sort of agreed with him. And
2 days after Bubba Wallace, the lone black driver in NASCAR's 3 national series, called for the sanctioning body to ban all Confederate flags at racetracks, the organization, NASCAR, did just that. Quote, The presence of the Confederate flag at NASCAR events runs contrary to our commitment to providing a welcoming and inclusive environment for all fans, our competitors, and our industry. Bringing people together around a love for the racing and community that creates it is what makes our fans and sport special. The display of the Confederate flag will be prohibited from all NASCAR events and properties.
You know, interestingly enough, the NASCAR, I'm just thinking about this right now, but NASCAR is run by the LaFrance family, okay? And Roger Penske has bought some tracks, and he owns a lot of race cars, and he's huge in all forms of racing. And I have a feeling that he probably had some input to this. I'll have to find out, but he's not the kind of guy that wants to put up with that kind of stuff. So,
well, good for NASCAR and good for Bubba Wallace. And you are saying, where are you on the Confederate flag pop? Are you pro?
Oh, I think that it's okay if it's tattooed on your dick and nobody ever sees it.
Right. Other than that,
no, you shouldn't have it.
All right, let's get to my first conversation of the day with my old friend Wajahat Ali right now. Thanks, Pop.
Okay, son. Love you.
Love you too. I have him now. He is back. It's been far too long since he joined me here on the podcast. Very psyched to have him. Wajahat Ali on the phone. Hey, pal.
Pete Dominic.
It is me. It is you.
Your very ethnic name. Very thuggish name. A thuggish name that does not respect law and order, that Dominic.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's what people hear when they hear that name. Either that or, well, two first names. What's that about? Shut up. I have no identity or ethnicity whatsoever.
Oh, yeah, Dom, that is true. That does give you, you get two Disneyland keychains.
Dude, you have no idea how hard it is, my struggle with this name. It's so much worse than yours.
Dominic? But the thing is, like non-white people, we don't really see Dominic as a first name, even though it totally is. But like, I'm sure the whites were brutal to you. Like there was like two first names, loser. You're like, no, why, Mom?
The whites, it's not the whites, it's the Hispanics who, when they hear the name Dominic, they always add a Q because they only know Dominique.
Pete Dominique is actually far more exciting.
Anything is. Yeah. It is weird I'm totally joking, but I really don't have, my wife does, but I don't really have much of an ethnic identity. That's not been a role in my life. Like so much of your life has to do with the richness of your culture, your religion, being first generation. You talk about the food, everything. I got nothing.
But the funny thing is, you say you have nothing. The sad irony of the fact is that all of us are ethnic, because there was a time in America when your ancestors came here that they were considered the ethnic outsiders. What's your background?
Well, my dad is Italian Lebanese and my mom is Irish. But before you answer that, I mean, you're right. That's true. But don't you think there's something to any nation, but especially America, after 3, 4, 5 generations? There's just nothing particularly unique. You don't have any connection to or identification to the culture where your ancestors came from. For the most part, I think that's true.
Yes and no, in the sense. So this is what you've touched upon, something which is fundamental to understanding even what's happening right now. Is you said Italian, Irish, and Lebanese, right? So in the 19th century, the Know Nothing Party, which emerged, very similar to the modern MAGA, right? Their entire reason of being was that they were the natives party. And specifically, they were measuring their nativity against the ethnic outsiders who at that time were Irish Catholics. There was a massacre in Louisville, Kentucky, where the Know Nothing Party, members of the Know Nothing Party, literally did riots and killed the Irish, right? And then you had the Italians, in the 1920s, the Immigration and Nationality Act that passed, that put the emergency quota, right, was to restrict those undesirables that were mostly coming from Eastern Europe and Southern Europe, which is Eastern European Jews and Southern Europeans. Now, to answer your question, or to connect the dots, the difference is you can afford, in a way, to say, like, I'm just whatever, I'm just a white dude. Because even though Italians and Germans and Irish Catholic have had this type of hazing process, you guys were able to melt in or merge into this thing called whiteness. Whereas if you look at Black Americans who've been here for 400 years, or look at Chinese Americans, right, or look at Mexicans, or even me, we are always reminded that we're the other, if that makes sense. And as such, you kind of have to hold on to your ethnicity or like your community or your roots, because even if you kind of want to blend in or you want to aspire to whiteness says these country club doors are closed to you. So that's why Jews go create your own gyms, your own what do they call them? Not the
Community
YMCA's,
centers.
the community
JCCs,
centers, and your own JCCs, your own synagogues, and your own mosques. And it's not necessarily defensive or reactionary, but it's kind of like I have to essentially fight for this mosque, for this synagogue, for this Catholic church, to name my children this name, because even naming your child an ethnic name, which is not considered quote unquote safe, like Dominic, that is an act of resistance if you really think about it.
Oh no, I think I've even argued in the past that it's probably not the smartest thing to do, because of what you're saying. You're torn. Are you torn between your cultural identity and wanting to be, I'll use the word invisible, meaning not wanting to just fit in to the mainstream. My whiteness allows me to be invisible. Nobody looks at me and thinks anything when they see this vessel coming, other than, wow, that guy's probably a model. But if you have any kind of minority status or connection to your ethnicity, and you want to be like me and invisible, not judged, you can't. And it's only going to make it harder if you choose an ethnic name.
Yeah. And so that's the tension, right? Because the tension is a lot of people think, oh, you darkies are complaining and whining now about racism, always playing the race card and being the race hustlers, always whining and complaining. And yet you look at these armed white militia people taking over and shutting down the Michigan State House because they didn't want to wear masks, right? Point is that this type of struggle to simply be is so exhausting, right? Because
the struggle to simply be is so exhausting.
Yeah, the struggle to simply be, to simply exist. I mean, when people say we're resisting against Trump, what I always try to remind audiences is resistance is unequal. Like, Cuomo in late March said this coronavirus has flattened us equally. No, it has flattened all of us, but has flattened us unequally. If you're just looking at how people of color, in particular Black and brown communities, have suffered as a result of coronavirus, right? And so for many of us, people of color, like, we don't want to, I'm telling you, we don't want to talk about racism. It's exhausting. Toni Morrison paraphrased it best, right? It's distracting. It just distracts you because you always have to prove your intellectual worth. You have to prove that you're loyal. You have to prove that you're a patriot. You have to prove that you are willing to assimilate, to integrate. And that type of gymnastics, that the daily mental gymnastics, the constant strategizing, even in corporate America, like we're in the media, just talk to people of color, right? Like the type of mental gymnastics we always have to do about how to appear safe, right? How do we not terrify our white colleagues? And then at the same time, there is this innate type of pride that you have. Is it like, why should I blend into yogurt? I don't want to melt into anything. Like I want to be myself. I want to be like a whole person and body. Like I prefer the salad metaphor. I don't want to melt into anything. And how much are you willing to give to blend into whiteness that will never accept you no matter what you do? That's the key. That's the key question. How much are you willing to give? And when you deep down know, if you give up your name, if you give up your religion, if you give up your traditions, you will still never be white, and they'll still never accept you.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so then you think to yourself, well, my family came to this country for religious freedoms, for the opportunity to have a multisyllabic name, for the opportunity where you can be a person of color and practice whatever religion you want or not want, and people will still accept you. That's the American dream. That's what you guys sold. That's what's on the billboard. So why the F should I trade in my name, trade in my heritage, trade in my culture to blend into something that will never accept me? In fact, I reject that, and I'm going to challenge America to be the America it promotes itself to be all around the world.
Because
and that's where I think Black people in particular and people of color are the conscience of America historically, because we challenge America to live up to her ideals.
I love it. But at the same time, if your name wasn't Wajahat Ali and it was Pete Dominic or Jim Smith, and your application, that's what it said on your application to your job or to your college, there's a lot of data that says you're more likely to get in the door. You're more likely to get accepted. You're more likely to get hired just by the name on the application that doesn't designate. There's no red flags of ethnicity. It's not Shaniqua. It's not Ali. It's Dominic. It's Smith. It's white. It's normal. It's American. Whatever.
Absolutely on point. And a latest study will blow your mind is that even when people of color, especially Muslims, they were doing this about Muslim immigrants, right? They changed their name to make it sound more white. They were still discriminated against because of their ethnicity. It still didn't protect them. And what you're saying, though, the context is correct, is that the studies show that the darker your skin color, the less your chance of succeeding in corporate America. The darker your skin color, the less money you make. It corresponds to the skin color, gender, and also, wait for it, height. Height plays a big difference. So if you're shorter, that's also leads to more discrimination against you, right? So the question then becomes, if you're already a target, why are you expanding the target by outwardly embracing these quote unquote ethnic names, right? And you've really hit on something, because there are a lot of immigrants who, I'll give you an example, and this for your listeners, just sit with this for a second. My generation, born and raised in this country of Muslim Americans, these are the conversations we've had over the past 6 years. I'm about to have a kid. What should I name the kid? I want to give him a Muslim name, but I want to give him a name that blends so they don't get picked on, because they're going to be a person of color and Muslim. Adam is an Arabic name, but white people will call it Adam. Rayyan is a beautiful name, but they'll call him Ryan. Layla's great. They like Layla. And so we were having this conversation. We've had these conversations. And as I'm sitting there having this conversation, I'm like, this is not normal, people. We are policing our unborn children's names in order to protect them in a country that we were born and raised in, because we have a feeling that they will not be accepted simply due to their skin color or their ethnicity or an extra syllable. Do you see how effed up that is? And so a part of you says, bro, like, life is unfair. We want to protect our kids. We're parents. You're a parent. That's how instinctually how we were just created, right? Like, you want to protect your kids. Let's just give them a name, Rayyan or Ryan. But then my wife and I very deliberately went the opposite route. We're like, I'm going to name my kid Ibrahim, Nusayba, and Khadija. No Disneyland keychains with those names on it, because they're beautiful names. They have history. They have weight. They have substance. I named them those names for a reason. And in a way, naming my kids those names is a continuation of this beautiful tradition and legacies. But it's also, if you really think about it, an act of hope and an act of resistance. An act of resistance against the system of racism and double standards. And it's an act of hope that maybe, inshallah, God willing, when they grow up, no one will care, because we also had this president named Barack Hussein Obama.
Right. I hope you're right about that. And I, if for the first time I'm starting to think maybe you are, which brings me to the next question for you, which is, since the moment I heard of you and met you and read your first piece that I'd seen in the New York Times, you've been screaming about white supremacy long before it became, I would say, more mainstream, more acceptable. I was always happy that mainstream publications and media outlets would host your content, your opinion, your voice, because you were speaking truth to power about white supremacy in this nation. So my point is, you've been talking about this most of your entire career. What do you think about the moment that we're in now, and how do you explain why this time, according to people who've been in the fight their whole lives, like Angela Davis and others, it's different?
That's a very good question.
And do you agree?
Yeah, it is different. It is different, and the polling reflects that it's different, and the people on the street reflect that it's different, and it's not just a liberal and conservative thing. Even if you look at some Republicans, they're freaking out because even
Black
their
Lives
base...
Matter is like polling. I saw it like 60% or something. Like, people are finally understanding the anguish and the cry of people of color and their allies. It seems to be resonating in mainstream. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, not at all. So, indigenous Americans and African Americans in particular have been fighting and dying and talking about this forever, right? But most people of color have been talking about this because we have to live through it, right? And we have to experience all the double standards. And you're right. I've been saying it very loudly. Some people say bluntly. And there were, you and I had this conversation that you were shocked that CNN actually even hired me. And that's why CNN actually hired me, believe it or not. Like last year, it was during the Christchurch massacre. Remember that? Where that radicalized terrorist in New Zealand killed 51 people. And in particular, he was inspired by Anders Breivik, the mass murderer from Norway, who left behind a manifesto trying to inspire copycat killers. And he wanted to punish Europe for its multiculturalism and specifically for its tolerance of Muslim immigrants. And all the same, conspiracy theories and all the same, fears about the browning of Europe and the fact that the Western culture would be overtaken and replaced by the rest of us, right? That's what inspired the New Zealand terrorist who left behind a manifesto called The Great Replacement, which is the leading white supremacist conspiracy theory that says that Jews are the head of an international cabal who are using black and brown savages to essentially weaken and replace the white race. That's basically it. And, if you remember, I was there. I've been trying to connect the dots. I did the research on Fear Inc., the Islamophobia industry in America 10 years ago.
Yep.
I've been begging people that it's a transnational movement. It's globalized. The people who we mentioned in that document are now literally in the White House. I'm talking about people like, the mentors of Steve Miller, the people who influenced Mike Pompeo, our Secretary of State, John Bolton. And so here we are in 2020, the stuff that the rest of us have been talking about. Bannon. Oh, yeah, for sure. To the point where Steve Bannon, I always tell people this, it just goes to show you how kind of whiteness permeates everything. And an example of white privilege is you can choose to be ignorant about racism. We've been talking about this for 5 years. Like I was at the DNC, I've told you the story, covering the DNC for Huffington Post. And I went around and talked to white liberals. I'm like, yo, if Trump wins, he's going to do the Muslim ban. And they're like, no, he's not really racist. Oh, no, he's just saying that. Here's another example. Call Trump racist. No, he has racial anxiety. Here's my last example. I think it's racial anxiety, guys, that drove a large part of Trump's base. Oh, no, economic anxiety. And every single study says now what, Pete? Yeah. Primarily, it was racial anxiety, right?
Absolutely.
But our inability to even acknowledge it is an example of white privilege and white supremacy. We engage in so many mental gymnastics as a nation just to avoid talking about Voldemort.
Well, but specifically, I would say in media, like I was shocked by the number of people in mainstream media that would not, I want to name their names. I'm still a little bit uncomfortable that I probably shouldn't be, but I just don't have the context with me right now. And I'd like to know exactly what I said to a couple of these people. But mainstream people that had come on my show at Sirius XM, I said, you agree that Donald Trump is a white supremacist, right? They were shocked. Yeah. And I knew he was a white supremacist in 2004. I mean, it wasn't new. It was not. No. It was never ever. Everybody always knew, and yet it took years into his presidency for these same people to admit it, and they're still uncomfortable with it and have to.
So reactionary, so reactionary now. And I'm gonna to your second question, why we're in the moment we're in. So reactionary now that when we say, oh, we've been saying this, I have predominantly, exclusively, a lot of white followers who are like, oh, you could stop gloating. Like, they're so defensive. I'm like, who's gloating? No person of color is happy about this. But at the same time, we have to mention that we've been mentioning it, talking about it, acknowledging it. I've been on TV saying it. And so many of our peers and colleagues, not just in media, but in America, said, oh, you race hustlers. Oh, you guys are so reactionary. He just had a racial flare-up. It's just economic anxiety. I mean, the number one domestic terrorist threat in America is radical right-wing groups who are tied to white power movements.
There could be no doubt about it.
But we still don't talk about it, to the point where when I gave a 30-minute presentation in the summer of 2016 before the elections to in Washington, D.C., at an kind of like an Aspen forum with a lot of leading thinkers. I won't mention their names. Afterwards, they said, you might be onto something. And I went home and I told my wife, Sarah, I'm like, we're effed. Because the leading thinkers are not up to date about this threat, which I call Thanos, white supremacy, which is coming after all of us. This is 2016, Pete. And so now everyone's like, oh, yeah, we've known this forever. I'm like, word? Where were you last year? And I'm glad everyone is talking about it now. And the reason why I think people are talking about it is we have a combination of factors. We have a global pandemic, which has killed over 112,000 people, infected 2 million. The global pandemic has locked us down. There's tremendous anxiety. There's frustration. There's anger. There's pain. We also now have a recession that is going to turn into a depression. Both of those factors have, I think it's unquestionable now, based on all the studies, affected Black people, poor people, brown people, the worst. On top of that, we have multiple stories and names and videos of Black men and women who have been killed by the police for years. It's not just, George Floyd is not the only one. And the fact that people have seen the footage. And then I will say we have the Trump presidency that has mainstreamed all these once fringe white supremacist conspiracy theories.
Yes.
The Republican Party literally has mainstreamed it.
Yes.
You combine all those factors in a hot, crazy, wild summer, and all you needed was a spark. And the spark was George Floyd and the 9-minute video where he says, just like Eric Garner, I can't breathe. And then finally, the fifth part, which is key, is organization by leaders, the Black Lives Matters movement, and the elevation of people of color to once privileged positions over the past 10 years to shape this story and tell the story. Those 5 reasons combined together was just the perfect cocktail that I think brought it to the fore. That is my analysis.
It's great analysis as always, and is always very, very articulate. I love the way that you communicate, Wajahat Ali. Let me, though, ask you to compare the Me Too movement to what we're seeing happening right now in terms of, we saw a lot of men be called out in corporate America, in entertainment, in politics, as well as in I think probably all over the nation where you never heard about it, in offices and retail outlets and so on. But I feel like what I'm seeing now is something similar with racism. If we see that you have demonstrated some kind of textbook racism or even more subtle bigotry, we're gonna drum you out. I mean, I saw it this morning with the news that they got rid of these 2 people on a reality show, the Vanderpump Rules. You're seeing this controversy over HBO getting rid of Gone with the Wind. You're seeing this Anna Wintour thing. By the way, what is that Gone with the Wind controversy, Waj?
It's a non-controversy. Everyone who loves Gone with the Wind, you can exhale and relax. HBO Max, a streaming service that wasn't even around last month, made the decision to temporarily remove it based on an op-ed by screenwriter John Ridley. It's coming back, so everyone can exhale. Everything will be fine. All those defenders of Gone with the Wind who overnight all of a sudden cared about Hattie McDaniel and preserving the legacy of Hattie McDaniel as the first African-American woman who won Best Supporting Actress, because you want to preserve her legacy, but you don't want to take a knee for Black Lives or mention Black Lives Matter. Don't worry, you hypocrites. You'll be perfectly fine and satiated. It's a non-controversy. And also, Gone with the Wind in itself is just a great, it's just such a beautiful example of America's lack of reckoning with its own racial history, right? Because Gone with the Wind, both the 1,000-page novel that I read in college for a film class and the movie, whitewash slavery in the Confederacy. Like, it's a romanticized kind of ahistorical rendition of the past. And imagine being a person of color, especially a Black person, watching that movie, thinking like, oh, I'm supposed to identify with Scarlett O'Hara and her love affair with Rhett Butler, even though they're kind of fighting for slavery in the South, where Black people were like tortured and killed. Oh, but it gave Hattie McDaniel, the actress, an Oscar. But guess what? People forget this. Hattie McDaniel wasn't even allowed to attend the premiere of Gone with the Wind.
Is that right?
Yeah, and it was Clark Gable and I think a few other people who said, if she doesn't come, we won't come. And at the Oscars where she won, and the reason I mentioned this for your listeners is over last night, all these Republicans and MAGA people who are losing their mind over a Gone with the Wind are saying you have to honor the memory of Hattie McDaniel. And I'm like, fool, you don't even say Black Lives Matter, and you're expecting us to care. Like, you're asking us to like believe that you actually care about Hattie McDaniel. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, you can't even take a knee for Black Lives. You try to drum out Colin Kaepernick out of the NFL, but now you're telling me you care about Hattie McDaniel. And so I did a tweet which kind of went viral where I said, well, if you do care about Hattie McDaniel, also tell people that at the Oscars where she won, she was not allowed to sit at the table with her Gone with the Wind colleagues. They put her in a small table all the way in the side, far away.
Wow.
Yeah. That's the history. And so HBO Max is bringing it back, and I think they're going to have a conversation about the history of Gone with the Wind. But look, this is a type of reckoning that's happening. And I think right before we talked on the phone, I was saying, a lot of white people are terrified because they're going to be going through their emails, their WhatsApps, their chats. And I've been telling people this is an opportunity. I don't want to penalize or punish anyone. I just want the culture to change. Look, people like us who are speaking out, I don't want to drag everyone. I just want equal standards, not double standards. I want you to change the culture. I don't want people to lose their jobs or their careers. If people come out and say they're sorry and they apologize and they make amends, fantastic, right? But in order to get to reconciliation, you know what you need first? Truth. And this country doesn't acknowledge the truth of racism. And so, because a lot of our friends are listening to this, I'm sure in the media, everyone who all of a sudden now cares, this is how you clean your own house first. Instead of canceling, Gone with the Wind or sending out some apology letter or blackening your screen, look around at your writer's room, look around at your news desk, look around at your corporate board, and look around at your masthead. If it is an ocean of whiteness, then you got to clean your own house first.
Such an important point. And it's really the most important thing, in my opinion, Waj, that white people can do with our often generations old networks. I got my dad's network. He got his dad's network. And I built my own network. But because our friends and our networks are often representative, look like us, that's the problem. And so the most important thing, I think, one of the easiest, or not always easy, but one of the most effective things you can do is hire people of color in your office, in your workspace. Give them opportunities in internships, and don't tell me that you can't find any.
No, but that's what you just said.
Well, there's no applications coming in. It's not my fault. Well, go find some. Go ask someone to help you. There's a million resources that would love to help you.
And that's the problem. What you just said is the problem, is that there's a lot of well-intentioned people. And that's the key thing, is like, I realize people are well-intentioned, but I asked a writer one time, and he just articulated, I said, like, how come, and this is when I was trying to break into Hollywood. I just asked him, like, how come like all the writers are white? And he goes, and he's white. He goes, that's a really good point. You know what? Like, most of us are just friends and buddies, and like we know each other. It's like a community. It's like a tribe. Like, some people and you go into the same school, you guys travel in the same circles, and voila, the entire room looks like your homies, right? And then when you go up to them, and I just tweeted this like earlier today, I've been told this so many times by so many editors and publishers and producers, well, we have tried to find these darkies and these Muslims. We just don't know where they exist. They're just not around. If there were good ones, we'd find them. And I'm like, how hard did you really try? Because what you're telling me then, and this is, I think, an important point, is if you're telling me that your magazine or your newspaper or your studio has hired the creme de la creme, the best of the best in the world of 7 billion people, and all of those people, or most of them, happen to be white, then what you're saying is the rest of us aren't the best of the best, which might be true. But that also means you have to be excellent and brilliant 24/7. And if a guy like me, a brown Muslim guy, comes in and runs circles around your table, then you got to ask yourself, maybe something's wrong. Maybe I haven't done the work. Maybe my privilege has blinded me from actually doing some effort to literally reaching out to people of color and saying, yo, give me names and resumes. And you know this, that people have been doing this for the last 5-10 years, but it's kind of been, you know how it is. It's kind of just superficial. Like I shared this story real quick. I got, like, this was 2 months ago, man, in New York. I got asked to apply for an editor-in-chief position, or like a massive editor position for a very well-known outlet. I'll tell you the name of the outlet after we start recording. And during the process in the interview, I just kind of casually asked, I'm like, wait a second, are you just kind of talking to me for diversity outreach? And the lady said, yes. And I said, huh. And she says, yeah, we kind of already know who you want, but, we just thought we'd, cast out the net, which means they bring in people of color to launder the process to give them a cover. If anyone asks,
Gross.
oh, did you
Weird of her to admit that.
Because I think we were just getting along, we were talking, and, we're in the groove, and I kind of just admitted, I asked him, and she said, yes. So it's this superficial tokenism. And people of color aren't stupid. Like, we know when we're the diversity hire. We just Trojan horse the opportunity.
What is this hashtag publishing paid me?
Oh, it's a really good one. It's fantastic. I hope you can name the author who started. It was a Black woman, started a few days ago, but it kind of I caught on to it when Roxane Gay, author critic, talked about how she was paid $15,000 for Bad Feminist. Now, for those of you who don't know, Bad Feminist was a bestseller, critically acclaimed water cooler book. Roxane Gay, a Black woman, was paid $15,000 total for that book. Okay. And so it started off with a lot of Black women saying, this is what we've been paid in the publishing industry. And then a lot of writers of color, women of color, said, this is what we were paid. And then some white writers came out and said, oh crap, you were paid $15,000. I'm a nobody who wrote one viral article and I got paid $400,000 for a book. So for the past 5 days, if you follow the hashtag publishing paid me, you will see an insane discrepancy in the publishing industry, which is 76% white, between what white authors get paid and authors of color, to the point where Jesmyn Ward, who's won 2 National Book Awards, a Black author, she struggled to get 6 figures for her 3rd book after winning 2 National Book Awards.
Wow.
Isn't it wild? It's wild.
Well, somebody's going to say the market decides.
Well, who decides the market? Who makes the market? And the really good thing, if you guys think these are like Black and brown authors just railing against white people, no, they've been very just go to Publishing Paid Me, and you'll see Roxane and others say, I love my agent, I love my editors. They really tried their best. This is just how the industry is. The industry's effed up. I appreciate my white editors who white friends and colleagues who really vouch for me. But what can we do? Chip Creek, white dude, said he got an $800,000 advance for his debut. $800,000. He says, I'm still in shock about it. Quote, but I'm more shocked to see the numbers from writers of colors like the extraordinary Jesmyn Ward. Again, a multiple National Book Award winner who's never gotten that type of money, even after winning 2 National Book Awards. Maybe she gets paid it now. I hope so.
Let me ask you one more thing about politics, which is, I know you've been tweeting a little bit about this and talking about this. The president's approval numbers are, again, cratering, and you're starting to see, there's been this hypothetical idea that if he starts to lose support amongst his hardcore supporters, if his numbers really start to crumble in the run up to the election, Republicans in Congress, specifically in the United States Senate, where they are the majority, will start abandoning him. Is there anything that tells you that is beginning to happen, might happen? Are you seeing that anywhere?
Nope. Have you seen that? I haven't seen that. All we get is Lisa Murkowski, who develops one vertebrae in her spine. You see Susan Collins, who is always concerned, but votes exactly how Trump wants. And you see Mitt Romney. And I'll give Mitt Romney credit where credit's due. He was at 1 vote, Republican vote, during the impeachment. And he marched like his father marched and said Black Lives Matter. Until you see Republicans in droves going in front of the cameras and denouncing Trump for his policies, his actions, and saying that they're not going to support him, we should retire the fiction that the Republican Party is in any way, shape, or form going to betray him.
Right.
That being said, I have always said for 4 or 5 years, I think I've said this on your show, when you have asked me, what will it take for Republicans, conservatives, voters to abandon Trump? And I've always said this from 2016 onward. Only when they experience immense personal pain. Then and only then will some, not most, not many, some abandon him. And I always assumed that would unfortunately be a recession. I never thought there would be a pandemic and recession and racial divides. But I think there's immense personal pain. I said when literally people die and their family members die, then you'll see at most some abandon him. And that's what you're seeing now, because literally people are dying. Seniors are dying, and seniors, white seniors who are like the base of the Republican Party, they're like, oh, my party kind of wants me to be the canary in the coal mine and die for the economy. I'm not down with that. And you're seeing a little bit of shift. So all I said was, and I've always said this, you just need enough to chip away. You don't need like this monumental groundswell, because the fool only won by 78,000 votes across 3 states. He lost by 3 million votes. People have made Trump out to be Voldemort, like he's unassailable. I've said no, the dude only won by 78,000 votes, plus voter suppression, plus cheating, plus our effed up both sides media analysis. You see how many things had to go like in his favor to barely win? And so now what they're going to do, unfortunately, is they're going to go all in with cheating. So we saw Georgia last night,
right,
which should be the number one story.
Right.
The fact there's like naked, shameless voter suppression happening in Georgia. You saw that happen in Wisconsin. All of that is a rough draft and a test run for what's going to happen in November. And if Republicans are smart, they should see the people out on the streets. And this is the thing for Republicans. I think they're going to go ahead and cheat. But can you imagine if that shit happens in November? I think there's going to be riots in the street, man. That's my fear. I think people will be like, you take away my vote, plus pandemic, plus a depression, plus this corruption. I think people will come out on the streets. What do you think?
I think they have been. I mean, I think that's what we have seen to some extent. I think the timing of the pandemic and the kind of the reopening and people being so desperate. I think people have been they're so upset, and whether it's fair or not, I think it is obviously, to blame Trump for the death and the pandemic because he didn't see it coming, didn't name it, didn't do anything about it, has made it only worse. They're angry at him for that, but they're also obviously angry about the police violence that we've seen, and it's created this timing to see people in the streets. There's something about the lines and what we saw in Georgia that's not as visceral. It doesn't bring as much rage as seeing a video of someone be tortured and killed. And so I'm not sure if people come out in the streets to protest the fact that their vote is being suppressed. I don't know.
Well, I think you saw rage in the videos yesterday, not just from black voters, but white voters also in Georgia, right? Yeah, you see that? There were some white voters just pissed off and frustrated.
I didn't see it, but
yeah. And then also, I think when it comes to police brutality, look at the 75-year-old man who was pushed by the police, fell backwards, hit his head and bled from the ear, and the demonization of him by Donald Trump by saying he was an Antifa terrorist, right? That's a white guy. That's an old white man who got pushed. Right. Or I don't know if you saw the video of that elderly white man who was pushed like in Utah, right?
Yeah, I did. I saw that. I saw the guy had a cane. And he was pushed. And
so you better believe that people because we've been so desensitized to violence against black people. I mean, there have been repeated studies that people just take it as, oh, that's what happens. Cops, the show Cops help, normalize this. Yeah. But I think when they see, holy shit, man, the police are cracking old, harmless white men.
Yep.
Like no one's safe. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I think that contributes. I think it really contributes to people.
Did you see the guy who got out of his car with the bow and arrow?
Oh yeah. A fat Hawkeye.
Yeah. Fat eye. He was my favorite of all of this. That was the most bizarre reaction. A bow and arrow, and he pulled it out and started pointing it. got the shit kicked out of him for it. But
it's not that bizarre. It's not that bizarre because if you follow U.S. history, that's exactly what whites in the South did to black people all the time. You can lynch.
That's because they were limited to the weapon. I'm saying it's 2020, who's pulling out a bow and arrow on anybody, anywhere, ever?
Well, what happens if he deliberately packed the bow and arrow while he was driving,
he clearly
knowing full well
he did?
That's what I'm saying. And that's his hunting bow, and you have a right to your hunting bow, and he's like, let me just go hunt some protesters.
You imagine
same
being
mindset
at a protest and be shot by a goddamn arrow? But did I just get hit by an arrow?
Imagine if you got killed by an arrow. You're like, mother F.
Yeah, I'm going out like this, but with an arrow? What year is it?
2020 is like 1920.
So weird.
And at first I thought like, oh, bow and arrow, but then I saw like that could have killed someone.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. People use them to take down big animals. I mean, it's insane.
If you ever saw the Bo Jackson 30 on 30, he's an avid bow hunter.
Is that right?
And so yeah. And so that's when I was like, yo, you can mess someone up real bad.
Oh yeah.
With it. So I mean, that's why we're laughing about it, but that guy with that bow, if God forbid that arrow would have connected, someone would have died.
No doubt about it, but we're laughing because he didn't kill anybody. He got the shit kicked out of him for doing it. So don't pull your bow and arrow out, folks. You're gonna get jumped for sure. And then
just stop racism. Just listen. Anyone who's freaking out right now, because look, there are a lot of our friends. Let's just be real as we finish this, right? There are a lot of not just white people, but just a lot of people I think of privilege, but mostly whites in privilege who are well intentioned, who logically and intellectually understand what's happening, but they're nonetheless feeling emotional anxiety. And I'll say this based on one incident where a friend of mine who's a director in his 40s, liberal, good guy, great guy. He was sharing a story of his friend, another white liberal director, and the white liberal director was like, man, it's really tough for whites now in the industry. Everything's going to women and people of color, and we just have to like struggle. And you can hear the anxiety in his voice. You can hear it. And then he was intellectualizing and say, but it's good because we need equality, and white people have been on top, good to the white supremacy. This is a good thing, but at the same time, we just have to work hard. So even though you're intellectualizing it, right? I noticed there is fear and anxiety. And so I want you all just know this. We're not trying to replace you. We just want a seat at the table. We don't want your seat at the table. We just want a seat at the table. We don't want special treatment. We all just want equal treatment.
Well,
and if
there
this
aren't
happens,
enough seats, though. There aren't enough seats for all of us.
You got to expand the table, man. That's the beauty of America. You expand the table.
You need to leave from the table.
Or some people can leave from the table.
No, a leaf. The leaf. The leaf. I call the leaf the thing that you put in the middle of the table to extend it when you have company. You don't call it a leaf. That extra part of the table that you put in.
Yeah. Right. That's it. That's right. Apparently,
never. Someone's never installed a leaf in his table.
I've no idea what you're talking about, but now that you've actually explained it, I'm like, oh yeah, that thing. But that's exactly it. But that's America, right? It expands. America has the ability. That's why people love this country. It has the ability to stretch and expand, which is why people come. And it makes the country better. It makes the country more resilient. It makes the country more delicious. And finally, the color that has always ruled this country, the color green. All the studies show that when you have more diversity, it is better for business. It's a win.
Absolutely right.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
More customers, more money. We're happy to be at your TED Talk. His real TED Talk has been seen by millions. Go watch it. Wajahat Ali, follow him on Twitter. And as always, thank you for your time, pal. I hear the kids. You better get back to him.
Yeah, it was. My son's having a meltdown, but I hope you were able to hear me.
That's great. I heard it all. Love you, pal. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Later.
There you go. One of my all-time favorite guests, one of the smartest guys I know, Wajahat Ali. Follow him on Twitter at Wajahat Ali. Watch him on CNN. Read him at the New York Times. And watch his TED Talk, which is just simply amazing. What a great, great guy. Always love talking to him. Always learn a lot. And smart, funny, and I just love him. All right. Now I am going to share with you my second guest and conversation of the day. Another guy I really admire quite a bit. He is a contributing writer at The Nation magazine, where he covers legal issues. He is a lawyer. He actually went to Harvard, everybody. That's right. Elie Mystal joins me here as a guest. I wish I could have this guy on, like Wajahat as well, but like every day. I just love talking to these guys. He is the justice correspondent at The Nation. He's on Twitter at ElieNYC. You've seen him on MSNBC a lot, although he hasn't been on in a while, and I'm pissed off about that. And you hear him regularly as a contributor at SiriusXM. He's a graduate, like I said, of Harvard College and Harvard Law School, and he is just a ferocious, brilliant, passionate, beautiful man. I love him, and we went over some of his most recent articles. Joining me right now, Elie Mystal of The Nation magazine.
All right, here he is. One of my all-time favorite guests. I wish he joined me every day. I wish you were the co-host of my podcast. I wish I could talk to you every day, and I wish that you could find some way to post at The Nation every day, because your work, your articles are really, really great. A lot of people know you from MSNBC and Twitter, but if they're not reading Elie Mystal at The Nation, you're missing out. So, co-host, are you in?
That's very kind of you to say. Unfortunately, hold on. My kids are in the room right now giving me something that I don't need. Thanks, guys. Bye.
What did they give you that you don't need? Hopefully it's not cigarettes.
No, it's a phone holder that I use when I'm doing FaceTime video, but I don't need it because it's FaceTime audio that we're talking.
Well, listen, the kids can be on the show too. If they come in, we work them in.
No. Their thoughts are not really, with this current moment in our society. I've tried to shelter them as much as I possibly can from all of this crap. So, here, put it like this. My kid almost got me killed this week because it was his last week of school, and he finished his large, end of year project, which was like a bird project. He had to build a bird and write a book about the bird and do a video about the bird. And so, my wife, painstakingly with cardboard boxes and egg crates, builds this freaking cardinal, right? With him, and painstakingly helps him with his penmanship to write the book. And, I help him with the video because that's kind of what I do. So we do the 2-minute video, and in front of his entire class on Zoom, he stands up there and he says, "I just really want to thank my daddy who helped me with the video, and mommy who helped with everything else." And I was like, dude,
that's thoughtful. He didn't know he was he didn't know he was giving away. Oh, that's so much better than I thought it was going to be when you said he almost got you killed. I was really worried that something much violent, more potentially violent, was about to happen. I'm glad he only sold you out to his teacher on Zoom.
Oh, and my wife, right? Because she's sitting right there. Right, trying to get me stabbed in my sleep. That's how husbands get stabbed in their sleep. Right there.
I don't know if that's where your concern should be right now. Well, lots to talk about with you today. And first of all, just wanted to get you to weigh in on what happened at the Georgia primary. How concerned are you about their primary that took place on Tuesday of this week, and what that means or signals for November?
I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is re-electing Donald Trump, that shit show was a 12. I mean, that was practice to how we going to steal the election again. That was embarrassing. That was shameful. It was unconstitutional. It was illegal. It was exactly what John Roberts wants. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in 2012 gutted the Voting Rights Act, and that decision, Shelby County v. Holder, that decision from John Roberts directly led to what we saw in Georgia this week. It is John Roberts specifically who has allowed white supremacy to reassert itself over the issue of voting rights.
What did he decide in Shelby County versus Holder? And everybody should look this up and read about it. But this is really the most important thing. A Supreme Court decision is now we're seeing the consequences playing out.
Under the Voting Rights Act that was passed during the Civil Rights era, the Voting Rights Act allowed for the federal government to prevent states from majorly changing how they conducted their votes. Right. So this was an anti discrimination civil rights law that required states to what was called pre-clear any changes in their voting structure with the federal government. So like if you were going to close 10 or 20 polling places, you had to clear that with the federal government. If you were going to change the times or the dates or the manner in which people could vote, you had to clear that for the federal government. The thought was that because the South had historically, enslaved motherfuckers, that it was that they could not be trusted to basically legislate their own state voting laws equally and fairly. That was the law of the land for almost 60 years. It was re-upped and reauthorized by Congress consistently and re-signed by presidents, both Democrats and Republicans, consistently. And then John Roberts decided pretty much by fiat that racism was over in the South. I'm not making that up.
And just to be clear, the entire Senate reaffirmed it, and George W. Bush, every Republican, every Democrat, maybe but one in the Senate, reaffirmed it. George W. Bush signed it. It was not a concern. The Supreme Court took it out of the legislative body's hands. Never should have. It shouldn't have been something the court decided, I would argue. And they gutted it.
Yep. He took it out of the legislative body's hands. He called Section 5 unconstitutional. And he said that the reason why it was unconstitutional is because we have made great strides against racism. So that is what allows Georgia or North Carolina or Texas or Mississippi or, name the place. That is what allows these places to massively revamp their voting laws, their voter access laws, to essentially suppress the vote of African American citizens. And that's why the city of Atlanta had like 2.5 polling places open for the primary, and everything went to hell.
I wonder if
exactly what, Pete, this is exactly what they're going to do in November. And people have been arguing about this. People have been trying to highlight this issue. Stacey Abrams has a whole, organization devoted to this issue. These Republicans are straight up planning to steal elections in red states that are going purple because they have large black populations. It's what we're going to see in Georgia. It's what we're going to see in North Carolina. It's what we're going to see in Texas. It's what we're going to see in Arizona, because the GOP knows that if it can hold on to those states, the GOP knows that it must hold on to those states to have any chance of reelecting their bigoted president.
I wonder if John Roberts has been asked, or if he should be asked or will ever be asked, if what he said about the South and these states in his decision on Shelby County is true, given now that we are seeing the results, the consequences of his majority decision playing out. I mean, shouldn't he be asked? See, you broke this system that had been partially fixed, and now it's being exploited again. Can't you see it?
I mean, Supreme Court justices don't give press avails, and they certainly don't have to give press avails to hostile reporters. The only people that John Roberts are going to talk to are other institutionalists who act like he's, some kind of moderate god and won't actually put anything tough to him. And even if he did have to answer, even if he was willing to sit down and talk to like me and answer my questions, it really wouldn't freaking matter, because he could say whatever he wants. He doesn't have to. There is no higher authority than the Supreme Court of the United States, right? They get the last say. They get the final say on what the law is. John Roberts saying that this law was unconstitutional means that that's the ballgame. To overtop him, you need to not only pass an entirely new law, and you can imagine with the current control of the White House and the Senate how likely that is. Not only do you need to pass an entirely new law, but then you need to get essentially a new court to uphold that new law, functionally overturning Roberts' old decision. And that's going to take, I am not being hyperbolic, a generation to get there. And that's a generation of Democrats winning things and appointing Supreme Court justices.
Well, it's going to be hard to win things if the system is rigged and Democrats are having trouble voting. So
I think Republicans knew that when they were making these calls.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to cheat to win because they can't win fairly. So That's Georgia. Now I want to talk to you about your most recent piece at The Nation, which was sorely needed. I needed you to write this piece very bad so I could understand how to speak articulately and intelligently to idiots, because I'm not that good at it, surprisingly enough. This piece is titled "The Bravery of Marching for Black Lives in the Middle of a Pandemic." You quote a couple of the critics of these marches and the hypocrisy of the protesters, because many of us were looking at these protesters who were demanding that state reopen and bringing their guns to the Capitol in places like Michigan. And we were saying that was very irresponsible for them to congregate at the time. And now that the protesters are out there for Black Lives Matter, and maybe that's seen as a more progressive cause, which of course it shouldn't have a label on it. All those people are saying, oh, you guys are all hypocrites. It's okay when people are protesting for things that you care about, but not when they're protesting for things that we care about. Why is that bullshit?
Well, for a couple of reasons. One, it is more important. All right. Just fucking is, right? Like, I shouldn't have to spend a whole lot of time explaining to people why protesting against state-sponsored terrorism, which is what police brutality is, I shouldn't have to waste a lot of time explaining why that is simply straight up more important, more morally and socially important than protesting for the right to go to Dave & Buster's, all right? This isn't fucking Little League baseball. Not everybody gets to play. So that's to me, the easiest argument is like, yes, this is more important. Shut up. But if we want to delve further into it, the fact is most of the protesters, many of them are wearing masks. And that shouldn't surprise anybody, because the Black Lives Matter protests or the protests against police brutality are not antithetical to the concept of public health. People need to remember that these protests that they were talking about, the All Haircuts Matter protests, as I called them, these people were explicitly against wearing a mask, explicitly against public health rules and regulations. So of course people are going to be like, dude, you're being stupid with your public health. The Black Lives Matter protests are not against wearing masks, and most of the protesters, not all, but most, are wearing masks. Pete, I would like to talk more about how all protesters should be wearing masks. I would love to be talking more about how we can social distance while doing collective action. I think that these are important points. I have made these points on Twitter, but my voice and the voice of lots of Black pundits who have made these calls kind of get drowned out, because every time somebody breaks a window at a freaking Macy's, mainstream white media just has a conniption, right? So like, you can't hear, it's as simple as people cannot hear me saying, please wear a mask, over the din of, oh my God, the looters of the Macy's, and how are they going to get their insurance money? Like that is literally what is happening, right? So A, it's more important. B, people are wearing masks. And C, the police are the ones in so many of these situations making social distancing and public health impossible through the use of their aggressive counterinsurgency tactics, right? We've talked about kettling. That is literally forcing people together like sardines to make it easier for the police to control them. That's why you saw last week 5,000 people trapped on the Manhattan Bridge for an hour. You can't social distance when the police won't let you off the damn bridge, right? They're arresting people. They're tear gassing people. You want to know how you get pepper spray and mace out of your eyes? You got to put water in your eyes. That's going to make you lose your mask in many situations. We've seen videos of police officers pulling down people's masks so they can pepper spray them.
I saw one like that.
Vance, when JD Vance or Andrew Sullivan or name your conservative commentator Tucker Carlson kind of calls hypocrisy on the protesters in these protests for not practicing social distancing, they need to reckon with their aggressive police forces and the tactics that prevent people from keeping themselves healthy.
Yeah, you write all about that in this piece that you just talked about, and it's really important. I want everybody to go read this. It's also want to talk to you about this the piece that you wrote before this, which is really heartfelt and heart-wrenching. To the white people who keep asking how to help, spare me the sympathy. It's the outrage that matters. Yeah, I mean, it does feel like this time it is different. It does feel like white people are starting to wake up a little bit more over the events, the more recent events, and wanting to learn and wanting to read and be curious in a way that maybe we haven't seen, and maybe you disagree. But this piece is really great about, what, if anything, we can do. And basically what you're saying, my interpretation is, you can stand up to racism everywhere all the time now.
Yeah. Now, yesterday. We've been waiting for you, right? Like,
Yeah.
This is, the issue that I have sometimes. And look, I appreciate you, Pete, for not offering to send me a fruit basket. I don't need one. Thank you.
I didn't offer. I just sent it. Did you not get it? Ooh, maybe you had the wrong address.
Look,
I did exactly what you counseled me not to.
That there are. I appreciate that for some white people that I know, I am their black friend, right? And I appreciate that role, and so I appreciate that sometimes when they are trying to learn about things, they might reach out to me for my perspective, and I'm happy to give that perspective. But the perspective is not, hey, here's what I need you to do to help me feel better about all this racism that I face. What I need them to do, the perspective that I offer is that if you want to help me, go do what I already have to do as part of my daily life. And that is sit around racist people every goddamn day at some level and call them racist and explain to them why they're racist and not give in to their racism. I have to do it in so many aspects of my life. And one of the little anecdotes that I mentioned in the piece, but I can expand a little bit more about here. I play video games, right? I play online video games a lot. That's my escapism, right? The amount of times that I have like general chat open and somebody says some racist trash is amazing. It happens all the time that I log on, right?
Really?
And
all
so
the time?
A lot of times, especially if I'm in a group setting, like I have to be the one to say like, that's some racist trash. Please get out of my group. Report them to the moderate. I have to be the one to do that. And I'm like, there are 50 other white people in this chat room. Like, you could do that too, right? You could also, in your free time, online video gaming escapism, do just a little bit of the work of calling these racist trash people, and reporting them to the moderators of racist trash. Like, that would be fucking helpful sometimes, right? It would be helpful sometimes if it wasn't only black people that had to report racist crap on Twitter. Like, that'd be nice sometimes. There are so many, I appreciate everybody who listens to me and I appreciate everybody who reads me, but I know that for the most part, I am preaching to a choir. I am preaching to a group of people who were already predisposed to agree with me, or at least agree with me on the larger points that, like, all people are people and we shouldn't punch gay people and these kind of things, right? There are rooms where I am not invited in, right? That room is your racist Thanksgiving dinner, right? That room is the golf club. That room is the sorority sister house, right? There are rooms where I am invited where those people are not hearing my voice and what I have to say about these racial troubles in our nation, but y'all are, right? You are invited into that room. You are invited over to dinner. You are invited into the inner sanctum of the club. In those situations, y'all have to be my voice. I mean, that is what I need from white people. If I'm going to need anything, that's what I need. I need you, white people, who listen to me and agree with me to go do what I do in rooms where I'm not invited. That would be helpful.
And today's anti-racism award goes to my dad, Elie. I'm up visiting my parents in upstate New York, and my dad has been going back and forth and sharing with me these emails that he has with these guys who I can only describe as racist people that he knows and has been friends with. And my dad showed me this email where he just replied to a guy who's been arguing with about the protests and so on. And my dad said, "You are a white supremacist. Thank you for admitting it. We are not friends anymore." And I said, "Dad, I can't believe you just basically ended your friendship with this guy." And he looked at me, he goes, "Oh, I've been on a friendship ending spree for weeks now." 75-year-old guy. I'm pretty proud of him. Good for, I mean, it's private, but it's like, it is actually what you're saying.
That's great. That's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what we need right now. And if we have that going forward, for the next 75 years, we might make some progress, because one of the things that has to happen is that these people have to understand that they are small, that they are in a minority, that most people don't agree with them, that their views are frowned upon in this establishment. Like that would actually freaking help, right? The work of, we see this, so much of my thoughts on the advancement in civil rights has been informed by what I see as truly amazing progress and success. We're still not there, but amazing progress and success I've seen from the gay community. The world for gay people is radically different now than it was when I was my son's age, and more different than the world is for black people. And one of the things that we've seen consistently with the advancement of gay rights is that for some reason, having gay people in your life makes a difference. Like, I don't need to be buddies with a gay person to know that gay people should be treated like people. But some people do, apparently. Some people need to have a gay niece. Some people need to have a gay best friend to really start to think kind of critically about the systemic homophobia and oppression of gay people that we see in our society, right? So having out gay friends has helped some people. The other thing that we've seen, kind of, I think, as part of the success of the movement, the continued progress of the movement, is really holding your allies to account, right? Gay rights did not start with a bunch of, rainbow flag wearing guys and yelling at Ronald Reagan, right? It started with them yelling at Democrats, started with them yelling at Bill Clinton, started with them yelling at Barack Obama to get on board with gay marriage. Long more we worried about Newt Gingrich, right? Holding your allies to account is actually part of the process here. And I think when we go back to civil rights, when we think about black rights and Latino rights, having friends in your life who are anti-racist, I think, is part of the solution. And holding your allies to account for their racism, I think, is part of the solution. It is one of the reasons why I think the white person's name I've mentioned the most since George Floyd was murdered has been Bill de Blasio, right? Because he's supposed to be my friend. He's supposed to be my ally, and he has been an ineffectual, disappointment, mainly for the entirety of his mayoral career, but certainly in this moment, there has been no more disappointing white man to me than Bill de Blasio, right? And I spent a lot of time explaining why. Because how can I ever kind of advance the cause of police reform when the Democratic mayor of one of the most democratic cities on earth, who ran explicitly on a platform of controlling police brutality, is sitting there running interference and making excuses for the cops?
Yeah.
How can I ever go forward if Bill de Blasio is the example of my friend? And so that's where, to me, I know it might seem a little bit attenuated, but that's how I tie that right back into your dad and what your dad is doing, right? Telling the truth to these people and holding your friends to account for their bullcrap is actually an important part of the work, and it's work that every white person could start doing today.
Because it'll make me uncomfortable, though, if I call out a family member. It's going to create a problem and a conflict, and I'd rather not have a problem or a conflict by calling a friend, a neighbor, and especially not a relative, a racist or a bigot or whatever they're being. I mean, it's really uncomfortable to do that, Elie.
Yeah. Welcome to my world. I'll go back to video games. My best friend from college happens to be a white guy, and he is like a guild leader in one of these online games. And so recently they put out his little guild, put out a statement, because, dude, online gaming gets real deep, right? Put out a statement on their guild website in support of Black Lives Matter. And one of the other kind of officers in the guild, I am not making these terms up,
Yeah, I'm really hoping you'll write your next article about these guilds. I'm really fascinated. Go ahead. One of the officers, what did they do?
Wondered, although they totally support Black Lives and the protests, do they really want to know if some of the people that they're playing with are racist? Because that would be weird. That would mean that we kind of couldn't play with them. And my friend, and this is why he's my friend, was like, hell yeah, I want to know if the people I play games with are racist. Hell, I must know that because I must exclude them from my goddamn life. Right. So yes, Pete, absolutely, it will make you uncomfortable. But what are you getting uncomfortable over, really? Right? You're getting one gets uncomfortable over knowing that people that they associate with are very bad people. Well, you should be more uncomfortable associating with very bad people, not knowing them, but associating with them. Knowing them is literally half the battle. G.I. Joe.
Well, I also, speaking of racism, I mean, there's a lot of undertones with that cartoon, but I like to think that the discomfort of not saying something is a motivating factor. The discomfort of you ignoring casual racism in the privacy of your own home or family or email or text chain. That should be the motivator. The fact that you didn't say anything, your silence is complicit.
I mean, people pass though. People find it easier to pass. And again, I don't come at this just from righteous mountaintop, right? I don't have white privilege, but I certainly have male privilege, right? And part of what I'm saying that white people need to do about racism is certainly part of what men need to do about sexism. Right?
Yeah.
And I have been in those rooms. I have been in the locker room, right, where the horrible things are being said, right? Saying something in that moment. Look, I understand it's hard. It is uncomfortable. It is unnerving a bit. But you say it anyway because we don't progress if you don't, right? I understand that I get to be in rooms that my wife is not allowed to be in. And when I'm in those rooms, I have to be her advocate. I have to. Or else we never make progress, right? So I understand. I'm not saying, I'm not talking about this as if I don't get that what I'm asking is difficult or challenging for lots of people. I'm just saying you have to accept the challenge.
Yeah, I think it's a really important lesson. The other example is, in my case, a bunch of straight guys from high school, 16 of us on a text chain, and one of them just drops in and says, "Hello, F words," and I'm like, well, no one's saying that word about gay people anymore that I roll with. And what am I going to do here? But that is one of the most commonly held things I see where you can just throw around anti-gay type of language because, all of your friends are straight. And it was kind of interesting because what I said in my heroic moment here, let me put my cape on. Hold on.
Yeah.
Got it. It's on. Was, dude, you know all the guys on this text change. You're assuming that we're all straight because we all went to high school together and stuff. But you don't know anything about our siblings or even maybe our parents. And certainly, what about our kids? Like, what a weird thing to say when you don't know anything about all of our kids. And that is just another place and space. Let's pause for like 10 more seconds to make it super awkward.
So no, I lost you for a second.
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I lost you after you said you don't know about our friends or siblings or kids.
You don't know about our sexual orientation.
One of the most effective words I've used in those situations is simply "know you're wrong." No, you're wrong. Like, I don't always want to have to go into the whole like critical race theory or social justice theory or
right.
queer representation theory. I always want to have to go into all of the scholarship and reading that I sometimes have in my knowledge or sometimes I need to Google. Sometimes a simple like, "No, you are wrong, shut the fuck up," is really go like this. Changes the tenor of the conversation, doesn't it? Like
for sure. Yeah, no, that's good. I like that. It's a great, instead of going into some scholarship of anti-racism, sexism, or standing up for people of LGTB, BT status. It's no, that's wrong. And that's not the hill that you want to die on right now. Right? It's 2020, dum-dum.
Exactly. And then especially if it's like a friend, right? If your friend then wants to die on that hill, that's when you fire up the Google machine, right? Like that's when you're like, all right, like if you want to fight about this, I can fight about this. But I have found, at least in my life, and maybe I'm lucky, that in most situations, a simple shut the fuck up really goes a long way. Right. Towards both expressing my displeasure or disagreement with the conversation and changing the conversation to, happier, safer, whatever topics.
You're right. Consider shut the fuck up, ladies and gentlemen. You're not wrong. It sounds good. It may just be effective. Before I let you go, I do want to ask you about a third piece of yours at The Nation. And everybody should subscribe to The Nation, if not simply for Elie's great work, and follow him on Twitter, of course. It's the question isn't whether Trump will go full authoritarian. It's how we will respond. We know no one is coming to save us from Trump. So how will we save ourselves? This is a great piece. Really good. You have all kinds of evidence of why we haven't been able to check this president. And then you provide evidence from history as a guide as to how authoritarians have risen and who, if anybody, stood up against them. You write, who is going to be our John Lewis and get their skull fractured as Trump troopers hurl projectiles at peace? Who wants to be, how's this Vietnamese man's name pronounced? Thi Quan Duc, who I think set himself on fire. Is that who that is?
Yep.
Lots of people are willing to fight this administration. How many are willing to sacrifice their lives opposing it? This is a piece that really, sadly, needs to be written and needs to be read, and a whole bunch more need to follow you on this, because there has not been enough speculation and consternation on whether or not this president is actually going to leave.
Going to ever leave. I mean, there's no sense that he ever will. And again, like I look, it is objectively true that our resistance to Trump has taken the form of rules-based kind of, virtue signaling resistance, and not the kind of desperate struggle against authoritarianism that we have seen at other times in other places of the world. Now, either Trump is a unique threat to the structure of American democracy, or he's not. If he's not, we can have an election and it'll go and be fine, right? But if he is, we need to understand how those people are actually stopped, right? And those people are not stopped with tweets. Those people are not stopped with, low poll numbers. Those people are not stopped by elections. Those people are stopped by direct action in the streets. And they're stopped by people who are willing to do a lot more than risk getting ratioed on Twitter, right? They're stopped by people who are willing to quite literally lay down in front of tanks, quite literally light themselves on fire, quite literally take projectiles and violence to the head. And I don't know that we're ready to do that, but I think that we have to be.
What makes you, I want to obviously believe that you're wrong, and that if he gets trounced in the polls on November 3rd in 145 or so days, that he will, admit that he lost and there will be a peaceful transition of power. I am a drunkard.
I mean, I think that if he gets trounced, I think we're in a better situation. If it's close, it's going to be the way that I see this playing out is that it's going to be the military's call, right? Like, and that doesn't mean that like a 4-star general has to like waltz into the White House and drag him out by his wig. What it means is that potentially he's going to, somebody in his inner circle, whether it's Jared or Stephen Miller or whatever, is going to make a call to the Pentagon and be like, will you support me if we stay? And they will either say yes or no. And if they say no, then we almost like we'll never hear about it. But if they say yes, then it's on, man. Then it's just on.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that, I think, or really anything else. All right, man. I could talk to you forever. And the co-host spot, I'll keep it open for you. You let me know if anything changes. I love you, buddy, and I appreciate you joining me today. Read Elie at The Nation and follow him on Twitter and do what he says, as I always do. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for having me, Pete.
Elie Mystal. Follow him on Twitter at ELIEMYSTAL. He's so good there. And read him at The Nation. Subscribe to The Nation magazine. And that is what I've got for you today. Thank you to my dad. Thank you to Wajahat Ali and, of course, Elie Mystal. And all of you supporting this daily podcast with a paid subscription. If you haven't signed up yet, go to the show link. Where's this paid subscription? And sign up. Or patreon.com/PeteDominic. All right, that is it for today. Thank you very much for listening. Let me know who you want to hear on the podcast, what you like, what you don't like. Always love to hear from those of you listening any way you want to communicate with me. All right, that's it. I've got to go. Time to drive back to Rockland County from Syracuse. That's what I'll be doing Thursday. I hope you're okay. Hope your family's okay. I appreciate you supporting this podcast, and I know that times are nuts and crazy, but you are not alone. You're not. I'm right here with you. I love you. I appreciate you listening, supporting the show, and learning along with me. Talk to you tomorrow.